This is the Eternity is a Long Time podcast. My name is Dale Comparanis. Thank you for joining me. Today is July 22nd, 2026, and it is my 24th anniversary of giving my life to Jesus. And I want to tell you about it because it is an interesting story in that I did a lot of starts and stops along the way. And you would think that I would have gotten it far sooner than I did. I'm just glad I did because it changed my life. I grew up in Concord, New Hampshire, the oldest son of Byron and Angela Comparanis. My brother and I lived an almost idyllic childhood. Our folks loved us and provided for us. We had a great time. The thing we didn't do was anything with God. We never went to church, and I was never baptized. Now, I did go to a Catholic high school, but that's only because I told my mom the summer before I was supposed to go to the public high school. I told her that I did not feel safe at the public high school. And that's all it took. I was out of the public high school and over to the Catholic high school. Okay. Now, my mom had been raised Catholic. My dad was raised Greek Orthodox, but both of them had basically left the church. And my mom always talked about the Blessed Lord, but that's all she said. And it was nothing more than that. My dad didn't really say much of anything about the matter. And while I was at Bishop Brady, I went through the classes. It was Catholic light, really. It wasn't very strict Catholic school. And went to a few masses. It was no big deal. Then I went to college, went to a military school, Norwich University up in Vermont. And I distinctly remember many times going down to the chapel in the evening, opening the window because the front door was locked, but the windows were never locked. Opening the window and crawling in and just sitting in the chapel, feeling very peaceful. I sometimes wonder if someone came up to me at that point and started talking to me about Jesus, how that would have changed my life, because I was obviously very open. Graduated college, got commissioned in the Army, and the first time anyone ever really spoke to me about Jesus, it was in such a way that I wasn't ready for it. I was in Virginia and at Fort Eustis, and for some reason I was in the chaplain's office in the battalion. Don't know why I was there. Don't even know what we were talking about. But what I do remember is that the conversation got to the point where the chaplain looked at me and said, in a very Southern Baptist way, "We're going to get on our knees right now. And we're going to pray. We're going to give our heart to Jesus. We're going to pray right now." And I looked at him and I walked out of the room. A couple years later, I found myself at another church, almost being drawn to it. It didn't look like a church from the outside, but it was a church nonetheless. They invited me to come to Sunday service. I went. This church was very much on the Pentecostal side. And when I started hearing a woman speaking in a very strange language, I beat feet out of there faster than you can imagine. So it's obvious that I was interested, but I never quite got there. Got married in 1989. My former wife was raised Catholic, so we got married in a Catholic church. It was fine. A few years later, after our daughter was born, I decided it would be a good idea for me to go through the RCIA program to become a Catholic. I was doing it more out of duty than out of anything from my heart, because it was just something I thought I needed to do. And I got baptized and I became a nominal Catholic because there was no real experience there. There was really nothing there. It was just something I thought I should do. And I look back at it now and I really wish I had taken it far more seriously, because I was living a lie of a life back then. You see, my wife didn't know, at least at first, that I was seeing other women and I was cheating on her. I kept telling myself I loved my wife, but I kept seeing these other women. And I think about it now, and I'm ashamed of myself, truly, for having done that. It is amazing how you can rationalize bad behavior. After a number of years, my former wife had given me more than one chance. I blew it more than one time, and she finally divorced me, rightfully so. Now, during this time, I had been dancing. I had learned to ballroom dance back when I was in the Army in the 80s. And I also sold life insurance and investments. And one of the other ballroom dancers that I got to know, Diane, she would every now and then mention Jesus to me. And it was kind of interesting. And I thought nothing of it. But there was something about her that kept me from making even the slightest advance towards her. I did nothing with her. Don't know why, just didn't. In 2002, when I had my divorce, in May, just afterwards, she called me. She had no idea I had gone through the divorce. And she said, I'd like to get together with you on a business matter. She worked in pensions. I worked in insurance and investments. The two areas go together. And so I said, sure, let's get together, talk some business. And she asked me why I had not been around. I told her I got a divorce. Would you like to go dancing? And she said, sure, about the dancing, but she also started telling me more about Jesus. See, she dripped Jesus on me, like she drips Jesus on people to see if they're interested. And if they're interested, she'll tell them more about Jesus. It's a very, very good way to evangelize. And she started telling me more about Jesus. I started asking her more questions and more questions and more questions. See, I'm a bit of an intellectual, and Diane, God bless her, by her own admission, is not. I drove her crazy with all my questions, but she did her best. What she did not do was one of those pray after me type prayers, for salvation. Pray this prayer with me, and if you pray it with an open heart, you receive Jesus. She didn't do that with me. And I'm glad she didn't. She didn't want to do it because she wanted me to discover Jesus on my own, not by any help from her. And this went on for a month or so. And so on July 19th, I was going to an appointment in New Boston, New Hampshire. I was leaving Goffstown, driving along Route 13 to go to New Boston, New Hampshire. And I had a conversation with God. I truly did. He was right there in the windshield, right in front of me. He was right there. He was talking to me. He wasn't talking audibly, but I knew he was talking to me. I could feel the conversation, and I was talking to him. And it was amazing. And I drove that 15 miles or so, got to where I had to go. I turned the engine of the car off, and I got out of the car and I said, boy, wasn't that cool? God had a conversation with me. And I left it alone. You would think that I would be on my knees because God had talked to me. But no, because I thought it was all about me. It was no big deal. See, that was my problem. I thought I was the great Dale. I thought I could handle any situation, any consequence. That's why I did some of the stupid things I did. That's why I lied and cheated, stole from my family. I was doing that because I thought I knew that I could take care of any consequence. It was hubris on steroids. Well, one night, a couple of days after this amazing conversation I had with God, Sunday night, July 21st, I was at Diane's house talking about God again. Don't even know what we were talking about specifically, but I know we talked about God. And we shook hands because at this point, Diane was just keeping company with me. She was not dating me. She wouldn't date an unsaved guy. She wouldn't date a guy who didn't have a relationship with Jesus first. Wise woman. And she said goodnight to me. It was about 10 o'clock-ish. And then I get in my car and I started driving back from Hooksett, New Hampshire, back to Concord, New Hampshire, where my apartment was. And on my way back to the apartment, I had to drive by the house where I grew up in and where my former wife and my daughter were living now. And as I was driving by, I realized how much I had messed up my life. Probably for the first time did I really, 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 really feel I messed things up. And so, get to my apartment, climb the stairs, open the door, and I think I closed the door. But at that point, I'm not sure because I went through the most amazing event in my life. I go through the door and I am on my knees. Now, I didn't go on my knees voluntarily. I was pushed on my knees. I got on my knees. I don't know how. It felt like I was being pushed, but I was there. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I got on my knees, boom, I am not in my apartment anymore. I am now standing on a precipice, overlooking a chasm. It's dark. It's windy. And this precipice is probably 4 or 5 feet wide and, I don't know, 15 feet or so long, jutting out from the chasm wall behind me. And I'm standing on this thing. And I can look over and I can see the other side. And the other side, where I was kind of rocky. On the other side, it's nice and flat. And there's one person standing over there. And I knew that was Jesus. He didn't say a word. He just beckoned to me, put his hand up and just moved his hand, silently saying, "Come here." And before I could get the words out of my mouth, "How in the world can I get over there? Don't you see there's no bridge there?" All of a sudden, there was a bridge there. But the bridge was this rope bridge that was swaying in the breeze. And you have to understand that I am deathly afraid of heights. So there I was, standing on the precipice. I couldn't go to my right or my left. I could only go back to the life I was leading and living and doing a very poor job of it, or I could go forward to the one who's beckoning me, which would mean I would have to trust him to get me across that rope bridge that's swaying over the chasm. And that, for me, was the biggest part. It's not that I didn't think that Jesus existed. I didn't trust him. And I needed to trust him. And this was a test. So I remember going up to the rope bridge, grabbing a hold of the two poles on either side, and putting one foot tentatively forward onto the bridge, but keeping all my weight back. I knew what I had to do because I couldn't go back. I had to trust him. And so finally, I took the weight off my back foot, transferred it to my front foot, and stepped on that bridge. And as soon as I put the weight all on the rope bridge, I started running. The weight on me that I had no idea was there, all that weight, all that angst, all that worry just was drained off me, just fell off me. And I started running on that bridge. I was jumping and I was laughing and I was just shouting with joy. And then I realized I was not on a rope bridge. I was on the strongest steel bridge you had ever seen, which just made me run and jump and laugh and shout for joy even more. And then, boom, before I get to the other side, I'm back in the apartment. And I just felt like there was just this light. I felt light. I felt there was light there, even though there were no lights on. I got up and I grabbed the porn magazines that I had and I went outside and I threw them in the dumpster. I couldn't stay inside. I had to stay outside because I just felt like this was such an awesome thing. I was grinning from ear to ear. Really, I felt like the edges of my my mouth were up by my earlobes. I was grinning so much. It was just amazing. And I finally sat down and I looked at my watch. It was after midnight. And so I count July 22nd, my spiritual birthday. Now, remember I said I left Diane's house about 10 o'clock? That means I would have gotten back to my apartment around 10:30, give or take. Let's say it was 11 by the time I got back there. What I went through, which I learned later was a vision, my one and only vision, I've never had anything since, was something that I thought, it felt like it only took like 5 minutes, if that. It actually took over an hour something was fighting me or I was fighting or whatever. But I went through a battle up there. I don't remember it, but I must have because it it lasted a lot longer than I can't even think of. So there I am. I finally, after a little while, I'm sitting outside. After a while, I'm like, I got to get up. I mean, I got to get up for work for tomorrow morning. I got to go to bed. So I go back up to the apartment, go to sleep wonderfully. The next morning, I call Diane as soon as I can without trying, waking her up too early. Diane, you won't believe what happened last night. And I tell her what happened. And she goes, "Well, that's nice. That's nice." I'm like, "Aren't you excited? This is so cool." "Oh, that's very good, Dale." What I didn't realize was she wanted to make sure that this wasn't an act because, rightfully so, she wanted to make sure that this change in me was real. When someone goes through an experience like this, something changes and you see fruit. For me, the immediate fruit that came out, besides the peace that was inside my heart, was the fact I couldn't lie anymore. I had been a very good liar. I couldn't do it. In fact, I've got to a point over the last 24 years where I am almost too honest. I have to stop myself from being so honest. I just can't. And I say that because sometimes you don't want to tell everyone everything, but I have a tendency to do that because I am no longer holding things back. I can't lie. And that was a huge change. So after a week or so, Diane was satisfied that there was real fruit there. We started dating, and 6 months later, we got married. Now, that's not the end of the story. Not only did I experience many miracles over the next few years and even up to the present day, but I went through two other huge changes in my life. One at 5 years after my experience, and then one 15 years after. And I'll talk about those in another video. But it's very important to remember that after you go through an experience like this, when you're born again, it doesn't mean that's it. Oh no, that's just the beginning. God has so much more in store for you. So on my 24th anniversary, I want to encourage all of you. If you haven't had that conversation with God, have it. You probably have had other opportunities in the past to talk about Jesus and to give your life to him. The next one, take advantage of it. Don't wait. Tell God that you need him. Tell him that you can't handle it on your own, because you can't. It doesn't matter whether things are going great or not so great. It doesn't matter whether you have 1,000,000 sins or you only have 10 sins. It doesn't matter because you can't be good enough to get into heaven on your own. It's impossible. The only way you can get everlasting life is to admit that you are not the center of the universe, that you come second and God comes first, that Jesus is your Savior and your Lord, and that you will follow him and follow him through thick and thin, because it doesn't matter what we go through here on earth. The promise of everlasting life with him is worth it. I pray that it doesn't take you 40 years to come to that decision like it did me. But however long it is for you, all that past doesn't matter if today you will have that conversation with God. Open your heart and follow him. I pray that you do, because I truly look forward to meeting you in heaven. God bless you. Thank you for joining me on the Eternity is a Long Time podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share this far and wide, for you never know who needs to hear this.